Hey gang, hello. Thank you for joining me again today. My name is Dan, and believe it or not, this is Daily Art Adventure number 960. Read it and weep. I've called it the end of my first masking experiment. All right, and I know I didn't give you a full 10-minute warning like they like me to do. That's right. I don't have time sometimes to wait. A little bit of explanation. This is an experiment. I'm trying to discover a way to mask a painting, paint more on top of it, and then pull the mask off and see the effect of a mask. All right. I started out in acrylics, and I used the way I always do it. I always start in acrylics, and I was using rubber cement, and that worked pretty well. I'm happy to report. I did have a question. You can go back and watch me do this last week. I did have a question as to whether I'd be able to actually get all the rubber cement off after it had dry acrylic on top of it, but I think I was able to do that. Then in oil is much more of an issue, more complicated, of course. So what I've been doing so far is I took some encaustic wax, melted it in a little glass dish, and brushed it on, and painted oil on top of it, and then melted. So here's the key part of this equipment is a heat gun, not a hair dryer, a heat gun. And the other day, I think it was Thursday, I think, when my last broadcast, I think, might have been Friday. Was it Friday morning? Friday morning. Anyway, and now it's Monday. So I've had time for this to dry. Let me pick you up for a second and just show you the mess. So you could see the drips. I want you to see the wax so you can see what I'm seeing. All right, do you see that? So this stuff right here is what I'm going to, as well as up here, this is what I'm going to melt off in just a minute. Now, I already have a bad feeling about this experiment. As you know, there's no such thing as a failed experiment unless you botch it. But that's what the essence of an experiment. But let me tell you why. Here's a clean paper towel. If I just go like this, whoops. So one thing is happening that I feared, and that is once I put wax on the canvas, even though I melt it and try to wipe it all off, evidently I am unable to get it all off. So that probably spells doom for this approach to masking. Now, I think, I could still come up with an interesting painting, but it's not accomplishing what I want. All right, let's go ahead, and I'm going to melt this stuff that's on here now. And let's start over here. Yep, 400 degrees. So the wax melts without any problem. But of course, as it melts, it runs down the canvas, spreads out. And so far, the effect is quite pleasant. That works well. Except what I just described for you, which is, let's try to do a little bit more here. Now, for those of you who are not familiar with my work, you might be asking, well, why are you trying to mask? Okay, and again, you'd have to be somewhat familiar with my work, especially my cityscapes, my typical work, my native style, if you will. And if you don't have time to go there right now, then I'll just describe it. My paintings are, yeah, see, that is not. So what's happening is there was residual wax still on the painting before I did this last layer of wax and then painting. So that as I wipe stuff off now, I'm not just wiping off the last layer of paint, I'm wiping off 2 layers, and that does not accomplish, let's go up here, that does not accomplish what I want. All right, back to why am I trying to do a mask? My paintings are quite representational, quite realistic, quote unquote, if you will, as long as you're not like if you're a real artist, no. If you're familiar with real art, then you would call my paintings quite realistic. If you happen to be, in particular, a young person who's stuck on internet hyper-realism, then no, then my paintings would not be described as quite realistic. But even though I, to a large degree, I celebrate the effect that the internet has had on young people in the art world, because it has made them largely immune to the preposterous political, not all of them of course, but a lot of them. Young people are largely immune to what the art establishment as circumscribed by the university art departments, municipal museums, Cleveland Institute of Art or whatever, North Carolina Art Museum, so on. Those people represent the establishment, and the establishment in the last art establishment, fine arts establishment in the last 100 years has taken this, has been on a long, dragged out temper tantrum against all things beautiful, and it has replaced beauty with politics, essentially. So I am not in favor of that. It was in a way, I could say, if I hold my mouth right, I could say it was something we, the human race, the Western civilization anyway, needed to go through. So I don't begrudge the whole thing. I just begrudge that we have to keep going down that path. The emperor is in fact naked, and there's been plenty of people, smart and otherwise, who have trumpeted the obvious follies of a modern art, quote unquote, using the term in the colloquial sense, have trumpeted the follies of modern art. People a lot smarter than me, and people a lot angrier than me. So I don't have to go. Anyway, so I do celebrate generally the effect that the flattening of the world is flat concept, the flattening that the internet, YouTube, Twitter, Tumblr, all the deviant art, all the populist art, young, especially youthful art websites. I celebrate mostly the effect that they have had on the art world, with one caution, and that is that this internet art world, this young internet art world, has what's the word? Over-exalted hyper-realism, a little bit too much, but that's right, and that's okay, because again, if you know me, then you understand that I think most people should go through a hyper-realistic phase in their art journey. I'm talking about artists here. Artists should go through a hyper-realistic phase, preferably in their youth, and then get over it. Anyways, that was a long detour, wasn't it? If you're familiar with my work, then you understand. If you're not familiar with it, I'm telling you, it's representational, but it's not hyper realistic by any means. So I'm trying to figure out a way, and this has been I've been on this quest for several years now. I'm trying to find a way to, first of all, get my paintings tighter, more accurate, more realistic. That's easy. I just slow down and draw more carefully. At the same time, I'm trying to get my paintings more messy, quote unquote, more abstraction. And again, you regulars, I'm repeating myself. Hello, Ismail and Uncle and David. And David is suggesting that turpentine might get the wax residue off. That'd be great. That would throw me for definitely some air quality issues, wouldn't it? I would do that outside, I think. So just looking at this, if my goal is to create interesting effects, then I've accomplished that. Now, I'm not finished yet, so having removed my last layer, I would certainly go into the painting again and paint one last, or at least one last time, if not a couple layers. All right. Whoa. I just found some more waxy surface. I am curious about. Tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to turn up my music. I am going to run downstairs. This is me, for those of you who don't know who's talking here. I'm going to run downstairs to my downstairs studio and look for a jar of a bottle of turpentine, and I'll just give that a try, air quality or no. So hang on just a minute. I'll be back as quickly as I can, going out the door, across the landing. You hear my grandchildren, my wonderful grandchildren, playing. I am not being sarcastic. Downstairs, can you still hear me? All right, coming back up now. Let's see if when I come back into range, see if you can hear me. All right, can you hear me? Yeah. All right, I decided here's one of my collection of mediums, and rather than waste time downstairs looking through this, here we go. Oh wait, it's Venice turpentine. That's no good. I hope I have turpentine here. I used to anyway. It may be that we're getting static, aren't we? There we go. Sorry. All right, it may be that the only turpentine I have is downstairs. Here we go. Yeah. Nope. English distilled turpentine. That was not it. Forgive me, I'm still flipping through I have here some cicative of Cortai. Does anybody know what that even is? From Charvan? Cicative of Cortai. That's me. I don't even know what that is. I got it from my friends at Charvan. Never used it. Here we go. Well, citrus turpentine. Close enough. Let's see what this does. All right. Whew. By the way, here's something some of you might not know. There are plenty of natural options out there. You know, things, alternatives to brush cleaners and turpentine. Of course, I haven't used. I own the last time I used turpentine a couple years ago was outside, on plain air. The advantage of using real turpentine is that it evaporates so quickly. All right, so let's just see here what happens. I'm going to turn my fan a little higher. There are a number, I didn't finish that sentence, hang on. There are a number of, 100% natural, blah, 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 options like brush cleaners and so forth. But my experience is, and this is not a scientific study, but don't be tricked or fooled by the natural label. Just because it's natural doesn't mean it's non-toxic, or doesn't mean that it's not offensive to your nose, eyes, ears, mouth, bleeding from the gums. Because some of the natural products are just, so be careful. So, some of them are just so powerful. Some of the lavender stuff, I can't remember, I'm forgetting now, I'm getting in trouble but I have used some of the like super natural products and have just gassed myself. I couldn't even use them outside. They were so, the smell was so intense, and I was outdoors, and it was overwhelming outdoors. So anyway, that's all. And also, like, somebody makes a natural terpenoid. Natural, it comes in a green, has, pictures of Amazon jungle kind of stuff on the front. And that product, there's a liner. This is a lid for a paint thinner, for a brush cleaner. And there's a rubber liner in here. And the natural terpenoid devoured, ate up, completely disintegrated the rubber lining. So if it does that to straight up rubber, it makes me a little nervous about how safe it is for our body. Okay, I'm giving it a feel here. Now that wasn't, by the way, that was not true turpentine that I just used. It was called citrus turpentine. So my guess, because I don't have turpentine in this little cache of mediums, but citrus turpentine, the idea is it's supposed to do what turpentine does. All right, did it help? Minimally, I would say. Well, okay, since we've gone that far, let's try some plain old Gamsol. So Gamsol is, as I understand it, is the safest chemical for cleaning brushes. It's what I use regularly. Don't use odorless paint thinner. By the way, beginners, do not use odorless paint thinner. For one thing, it will eat up your synthetic brushes. And odorless terpenoid, I used that for quite a while. And then my research, which is not exhaustive, my inquiries led me to conclude that Gamsol was the safest. And some people say decry its toxic properties, even at that. So I usually, when I'm not painting in my studio, most of the time, here's my, by the way, here's a little trick. I never thought of it much of a trick, but I was at a class one time with a bunch of smart artists, and they thought this was clever. Never, all of my paint container, all of my paint thinner, quote unquote, Gamsol terpenoid paint thinner, paint brush cleaner containers are inside a larger bucket. All of them. There's always, for me, always a bucket in a bucket, no matter where I'm painting in. So anyway, that's the way I leave it. That's the way I leave the room pretty much any time that I'm not painting, so that I don't have that toxic, if it is toxic. Speaking of toxic, I've got this stuff all over my hands, right? And that makes me a little kind. This is a studio wipes. Somebody told me that baby wipes will do just as well, and they probably will. But baby wipes smell to me like a poopy diaper by association. I was a good dad. I changed lots of poopy diapers when my kids were little. And to this day, that smell takes me right back, and it's not a pleasant effect. So, in fact, good dad schmad. I've had to clean some diapers in the last 3 years. When our grandchildren moved in with us 3 years ago, they're moving out probably soon, by the way, and we are absolutely brokenhearted. It's the right thing, but we have just loved having our daughter, her husband, and their 4 kids living with us. I never did finish the statement, why do I want to mask? And maybe nobody cares, but I realized that I did leave that. So, or maybe I did. I'm looking for a way to achieve greater realism and greater messiness at the same time. And because I paint in layer upon layer upon layer, first of acrylics and then of oils, I feel like being able to mask would be a really, really good way. So I'm sort of back where I started. The rubber cement works in the acrylic stage. By the way, David, you mentioned I am getting cracking. This was a bad canvas. That's part of the reason I did it. And I'm getting cracking here, but it actually looks quite nice. I like it. A nice effect. And I don't think it'll get worse and worse as the canvas, as the painting ages. Well, I'm going to paint just a little bit more. Might as well. Gives me the chance to mention too that I'm using a medium slow dry. Now, I think technically speaking, in the world of oil painting, Neil McGilp is not classified as slow dry. Please understand, it's just slow dry for me, who uses liquid most of the time. So if I use liquid, this stuff, you know, a glaze will be dry in 3 hours, certainly overnight. If I use Neil McGilp, the strangest named product in the oil painting galaxy, Neil McGilp, it'll be dry in 3 days. So that's very, very slow compared to what I'm used to. Now, but I have to use Neil McGilp because I already used it once on this painting. So you can't go from a slow dry to a fast dry. That is definitely what creates bad cracking. So let's just start doing some stuff. My eye is telling me when I wipe this stuff off, I'm ending up with what to me anyway is a not so pleasant washed out look. I mean, I guess what would you expect? I guess is one part of what I'm thinking. But it's not. It doesn't strike me as pleasant. So That's kind of a faded look. And just doing a quick glaze on top of it makes the colors glow again. Even if I wipe some of it off, it still is glowing. Let's do some dark transparent details. Then how about some straight up dioxazine violet to start with. So at this point, everything I'm doing is traditional, at least Dan Nelson traditional painting. The masking is probably finished. And if I were doing one of my normal, say, cityscapes, I would do the same thing. I wouldn't finish by removing masks. I would still have a final edit layer, so to speak, and maybe several layers after the last mask is removed. The purpose of the mask, in particular, to put it in other language, is I would like to retain more of my original abstract painting. At the beginning of all of my paintings, I start out with an abstract painting underneath my representational paintings, and I've always wanted more of that to show through. So that's another way to describe why am I messing with masking. That's the answer, because I want more of my original abstract to show through in the finished painting. And just maybe it's because I don't have any discipline. Maybe it's because I'm not very smart or not a bad painter. But for some reason, simply saying to myself, "Ooh, ooh, ooh, be careful, don't cover it up," that just doesn't seem to be working. It just seems to get covered up anyway. In my defense, hey, in my defensive side will speak up now. In my defense, it's partly because I do an abstract painting, and then I begin the representational painting, and typically there's 15 to 20 layers on top of the abstract painting. So that's, if you wonder why does it get covered up, even though I try not to cover it up, well, it's because there's 15 or 20 layers on top of it. That's why. So again, that's why I'm fishing around. So encaustic wax, I hope I find something good to do with the rest of this. Maybe I'll do some encaustic painting someday. Smells good. It smells like beeswax. Takes me back to my childhood. But it does not look like that solution. Darn it. It really would have been fun if that had worked. But the main reason seems to be that once you put wax on your canvas, you just cannot get it all off. And I'm not really surprised by that. I'll go ahead and finish this little abstract painting. It's you maybe know I love good abstract paintings. That's why I try to do good ones as opposed to bad ones. And this is what category? The category is, first of all, I would say compositional. It's classic composition, number one. Number two, it's kinesthetic. Large marks, large movements. You can see the artist, made these marks, big marks. So kinesthetic. And number three, maybe chance oriented. There's a lot especially because of the masking. There's a lot of accidental stuff. I'm liking this purple, by the way. You can probably tell because I'm putting quite a bit of it on the canvas. It really has a nice busy texture. Textures that would be hard to emulate, hard to create, manufacture, period. If one didn't know how I achieved this texture, I don't think no one would be able to do it. So it was good. It was a good experiment in that regard. Let me let you inside my brain just a little bit. I don't know if anybody's still watching, I guess. Thank you, Uncle, for giving us more information on the Neil McGilp. Ah, it's a contemporary version of Maroger. I think it's Maroger. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Cicative Coutrai. Thank you for looking all that stuff up, Uncle. I appreciate it. Hello, Philip Jackson. You're exactly right. I think you're exactly right. It is an adhesion problem. Now, my sense is that, again, having melted and rubbed off and so forth, I don't think, I could be wrong, it's hard to emulate the effect of, 200 years of aging on a painting, but I think it's fairly stable. And part of what makes me think that is simply the fact that encaustic wax is in fact an ancient and stable, archivally stable product in itself. So I don't think this. Now I wouldn't be surprised after this all dries that you could come up here with a sharp fingernail and scratch off some paint. I think that's conceivable because of the wax. But let's just assume that nobody's going to walk up and start, tooth and tong, nail and tong, attacking the painting. We'll assume that there are not many paintings that would really like that treatment anyway. So I was going to start telling you a little bit then about some of you old timers, you've heard this kind of thing before, but what am I thinking? The elements of design, pretty universal. Line, shape, color, design, value, texture. I'm missing one. Line, shape, color, design, value, texture. I always do that. There's 6. And then it seems like there might be one that I'm missing. But those are the elements of design. Then I'm looking for a piece of cardboard that's just the right length here, by the way. Then the principles of design. This is like high school art stuff, okay? Principles of design are, in a sense, the verbs that you apply to the nouns. The nouns are line, shape, color, design, value, texture. And the principles of design, this is my language, I've never heard anybody else put it this way, but they are, in a sense, I just got paint along this edge of this cardboard here so I can make a nice sharp line. And the principles of design are not nearly as universal or codified, not nearly as agreed upon as the elements of design. Okay, so the principles of design can include such words, and you can Google all this, but include such words as balance, tension, repetition, variety, and I'd said they're verbs, and clearly those aren't verbs, but they're all action. They infer, I should say, they infer an action. So anyway, that's just a way to think what's the difference between the two. So one of my favorite when I'm painting, one of my favorite operational principles of design is I use the word energy. Inside my mind, I use the word energy a lot. Right now I'm using the word, oh doggone it, I'm out of paper towels. That's the word I'm using right now. So energy is a very broad term, but it helps me a lot. And when I'm looking at a painting, especially at this level of completion, I'm looking at the canvas and looking for areas that need more or less energy. And energy is created by contrast, color. Oh boy, there's 2 C's. Maybe I could think of another C, and then we'll know it's really brilliant. Contrast, color, hardness of edge. Let's call it cutting edge, to get a C in there and being silly. Contrast, color, cutting edge. I said I'm being silly, but and texture. Okay, and other things as well. But and of course the question is, well, I said I'm looking for energy levels at various areas of the painting. And you could rightly ask the question, well, how do you know what part of the painting needs more or less energy? By the way, how do you achieve less energy? Well, typically by scumbling, or what I call my fuzz layer. Translucent paint applied very thinly will smooth out texture. I've got a large area of fairly low energy right here. Low is texture-wise, but high, that's maybe the lightest area in the painting, so it's high there. Let me point out this area down here. When I did this purple just a few minutes ago, this light area right here came forward. That was a significant increase in energy in this part of the painting. There's some real obvious rules. Let me get to those. Generally speaking, you don't want extreme energy close to the edges of your painting. Generally speaking. Okay, it's not an absolute rule, but it's general. Neither do you want extreme energy in the exact center of your painting, either center this way or this way. And in fact, this painting has, compositional. You could argue that this circle would actually be better here or here because it's almost in the exact center. And I think that's a good point. What I think saves me is that this circle is accompanied by several other strong geometric marks. And number one, they diminish the impact of the circle, so it's not so dangerous to have in the middle. This pulls the energy down, pulls this whole shape. So this is part of the shape, comes down, and clearly that's off center. I'm not sure that I'm right, but that's the way I feel about this. Anyway, let me change gears here slightly. I've been doing so far, since I pulled off the mask and wiped off the glaze, I've been doing all dark stuff. First of all, I glazed everything, then wiped off. That was a lightening effect. Then I've done dark purple, pretty much all purple. And at the moment, I'm going to keep it that way. But that means the next thing in line would be some hello, Radina. Good to hear from you. Oh, and David suggests texture with saran wrap. Yes. I love that effect. When wet paint, take saran wrap, stick it to the canvas, crinkle it up, or just it's going to be crinkled anyway, and then pull it off and you leave a neat texture. I have not done that. I'm not sure I've ever done it, but I certainly have seen a lot of other people do it, and I do like it. Yes, Iridina, you're exactly correct. Oh, and Ilko is giving us another principle of design. Conflict, good, yep. And Radina says, a woman's face, upper left side. I don't even want to know. I don't even want to see it, Radina. Once I see it, I won't be able to unsee it. And that will drive me crazy. All right, I'm just mixing up a pale orange, pretty much pale orange. Just want a little bit larger pile of it right now. So it's a light color, following one of my rules. This is not a Dan Nelsonism. When you do dark, you follow up by doing light. Okay, that's a rule I adhere to pretty faithfully, but it's not. That's a plain old art professorism. That's not a. That is lights first, darks first, lights last. So do you see right there? I just bumped up the energy of this right there by adding this light. Now here, I'm actually going to intentionally diminish a little bit some energy up here, doing exactly what I just talked about a few minutes ago. Scumbling, which is opaque paint applied very thinly. Now if someone asks me, well, can't you scumble with transparent paint? The answer is no, absolutely not. No, that's a glaze, right? If you have transparent paint and you're rubbing it real lightly, that doesn't leave a fuzzy, foggy, it leaves clear as glass transparency. So no, if you're doing, never paint with your fingers. I say that, feel obligated to say that every time I paint with my fingers. I do not have any cobalts or cadmiums on my, we go over this all the time. No cobalts or cadmiums on my palette. No cobalt blues, no cad, red, yellow, orange. And as I say, I do keep a wipe, baby wipe handy. It's not a baby wipe. So I just actually lowered the energy right here by just smoothing, pushing back a tiny bit. And I think I like it well enough that I'm going to do some more. I'm mixing up now even paler yellow orange. I like everything that's happening in here. So I'm not going to obliterate it or wipe it out, but it's okay to diminish it, to push it back just a little bit. Now boy, there's just no way to talk fast enough to describe everything I'm doing. At the same time, I'm bring you real close. Now this is a Dan Nelsonism. There was a red line right here. I don't know, I think that was made with some kind of pencil. And I just did this. I'm redoing it a little bit. I painted up to the red line on that side and up to the red line on this side. So that has the effect actually of increasing energy right along that edge, right? Because I create a little bit of an edge. Now, let me tell you, I think why I do that. Well, I do it because I think it looks cool. That's a little trick that I do all the time, and there's no accounting for it. It's just because, I think it looks cool. I will give this much definition to that particular concept. It is this, that if you put lines, and you don't have to use a pencil, but if you put lines on your painting late in the painting process, the lines will look as though they've been, as if they're laying on top of the painting. Like you finished the painting, then you made some lines. And that's okay, that's perfectly legal. But for me, I find it much more intriguing to do what I just did, which is paint up to both sides of the line, still, in fact, re-emphasizing it. And now that line does not look like it's sitting on top of the painting, it looks like it's inside the painting, because in fact, it is. Does that make sense? I've got exactly the same kind of thing going over here. I have another red line. I don't even remember where it came from, but I think it was made with a watercolor pencil. Someone will say, watercolor? You can't use watercolor in oil painting? Oh, yes you can. because as soon as you put an oil medium on top of the watercolor pencil. What is a watercolor pencil? Well, it has a little bit of wax in it, a binder to hold it together, but the color itself is just a pigment, just like the pigment that's in your oil paint. Probably the same exact pigment. And now, if it's a low quality product and subject to ultraviolet fading, then that's not a good deal. But these pencils are supposed to be high quality. This is Derwent ink tints. Again, a watercolor pencil. So there you go. I feel quite confident. And of course, once this painting is finished, I'll be putting a UV filter varnish on top of it. So that will even serve to even further stabilize any crazy pigments that I might have put in. I do try to avoid crazy pigments. In my opinion, watercolor pencil is not crazy. It's unusual to use in oil painting, but there you go. Since unusual has never been a big issue, problem for me. The fun, if you will, the challenge and the fun of abstract painting, of course, is that there is no picture, no image nothing I have to draw. So therefore, the painting stands alone on the elements and principles of design. So it's a very different exercise. By the way, a little while ago I described the 20th century art establishment as one gigantic temper tantrum. And I say that with some, let me go back to that for a minute. I say that with some sympathy because I in fact, I think the human race, in a sense, had to actually go through that temper tantrum. There had to be a kind of rebellion, especially after the camera was invented 150 years ago or so, right? After the camera was invented, because for millennia before that time, artists were primarily cameras. And the camera completely took our place and left. I mean, there are many forces at work in the art world. Hang on, let me think for a second. Yeah, I think I'm going to do. So at the moment, this is the lightest bit on the canvas. So I think the temper tantrum, quote unquote, was needed because there needed to be a pretty strong revolution, if you will, kickback against what art always used to be. So I don't have any bone to pick with the early abstract warriors who had what, in essence, I call a temper tantrum. While we learned in Clement Greenberg, here, let me just show you. Clement Greenberg was one of the biggest art critics, aficionados of the modern impulse. Art and Culture, Clement Greenberg, 1961. Part of the book I didn't need, but the part that I needed, I made a lot of notations. I have here my rather grumpy liberal Marxist and a snob. That is to say, he defines himself by what he despises, which is not a course of life that I would recommend for anybody. Do not define yourself by what you despise. But I was not Clement's mom. If I had been, he would have ignored me anyway. But so not, in my opinion, a terribly healthy individual. But and he was one that trumpeted incessantly Methinks thou dost protest too much, too loudly. What's the Shakespeare quote? He's the one who protested vociferously that the canvas was flat. And indeed, I believe that was an important lesson for at least Western civilization. I have no idea about Eastern art. I admit my ignorance readily. But the Western civilization, we in fact did need to learn that let me pick up a pretty realistic unfinished canvas here, unfinished portrait. I started this several years ago. Terribly smooth, but very realistic. I nailed it, and then the mother called back and said, "Oh no, I didn't mean for you to do that, but I was just thinking about it." Anyway, this has all the illusion of we're supposed to discern, aren't we, that her nose is closer to us than her cheek and so forth. And that their heads are closer than this. So there's depth, there's distance, connotated. This canvas has the connotation of distance. How much more a landscape does. And Clement Greenberg and many others said, no distance, no depth, no depth. That's an illusion. The canvas is flat. And again, I think we had, we, Western civilization, that was a good thing to learn. The beef, if you will, that I have is I believe I have embraced that reality. And usually you hear it from me in terms of we're not painting pictures. And I usually mispronounce the word on purpose, pictures. We're not painting pictures, we're painting paintings. And that explains why my paintings have so much paint marks in them, or just marks, period. Because we're not painting pictures, we're painting paintings. And anyway, so I think that was important. But what I protest to the professors is that, got it, okay, learned it, embraced it, internalized it, affirm it deeply. Now, can we just get back to good painting? Which sometimes includes the illusion of depth, like that portrait, and sometimes does not, although this, clearly you have the sense that this circle thing is closer than this background, but that's just anyway, I don't want to get that deep. Plus, most of the art establishment, they did a number of other things, but most of the art establishment, they would define art as a form of communication, which I disagree with vehemently. All right, I'm talking. I should be thinking about my painting. Yeah, let's stop there. I say to myself, says I, let's stop there and change gears slightly. Let's start looking at some points of color. I actually went through this the other day, doing it again now. What color is this painting overall? Just mostly overall. If you said orange, you agree with me. If you said, well, then I disagree with you. You say, well, it's got a lot of purple. Yeah, but is the painting purple? Is this a purple painting? No. It's got purple, but anyway, it's an orange painting. Yellow, orange, so forth. So one of this, I'm thinking now about principles of design, is the subject at hand, if you will. One of the principles is contrast. So I want to introduce some contrasting colors, some little sweet little kisses of color. I have a very intense red on my brushes right now, which means wherever I put this red, it's going to bump up the energy considerably. Simply by virtue of the fact that it's an intense color. Now, it will bump up the energy considerably less than that if I put the red where there are already strong hints of red, which is, in fact, exactly what I'm doing. Hang on. I just saw place. You understand? I'm hoping you understand. Here's what the internal mental process of an artist is like. This is in whether you're a beginner or an old-timer, experienced, either one. You may not be aware that this is your process, but it is. It's a series of guesses, the painting process. So for instance, right now, I'm taking a guess. See this dark brown, purplish brown, mauve line right there? I'm thinking that that would look cool. I'm going to leave this part just the way it is. But if up here at this part, if that mauve line sort of faded into or had red in it. Okay, so I've got red on a piece of cardboard. And I can go way up here at the top. I'm going to try to hit that line exactly. Right. Whoops. It just went down further than I intended, but I think it's okay. Nah, you mess it up a little bit. Okay, so what you just saw was, number one, a guess. Sort of, you could call it a hypothesis, perhaps, an educated guess. My guess was changing that into a red, along with the dark mauve, would look good. That's would look good. By the way, that is, I said a minute ago that I don't believe that art is communication. And by that, what they mean, truly, they mean you should be communicating a cause. And what they really mean is you should be communicating a political, philosophical worldview cause. And I'll just go ahead and tell you what the art establishment really means by that is you should be communicating a cultural Marxist cause. Okay, now that pretty much sums up the university art culture quite accurately. They want you to be communicating something, but they don't want you to be communicating anything good, so to speak, like life is good. God help you if you ever suggest to communicate that there is a God who's created good stuff. You would get scorned, you would get laughed out of the department. I know whereof I speak. Anyway, there you go. I did, when I was an art major in college, I didn't know that that's what I was getting. It was literally decades ago. Okay, I'm done with the red. I'm going to clean these two brushes and switch to something. There's some green already here. I think I want to exaggerate that. It's old green, so it's got stuff on top of it now. And I want to come in here and do some fresh, bright green, mostly on top of the green that's already there. Does that make sense? I was at there's a lot of unrest. Oh, let me see, you guys are just picking up a storm here. Bye, Uncle. Sorry, mister, you're gone. Long gone now. I've mixed up quite an intense spring green here on my palette. So I'm looking for places. First of all, I'm looking for things where there's already green. It's not extremely likely that I will introduce this intense green in an area where there is not green already. And again, that's pretty standard for me, even with my representational painting. In the final layers, in the finishing layers, the canvas itself tells me where to put color. For the most part, I'm responding to what is on the canvas is the product, the result of layer upon layer upon layer upon layer of painting process, right? And having so those layer upon layer have had an effect. They have created various colors uncontrolled by me, right? I didn't try to make them happen. I just allowed them to happen, and now I am more in a control mode, and I'm re-accentuating some of the accidental colors that have appeared on the canvas over these many layers. I've got a little bit of blue. It's slightly dirty now. I'm trying to decide if I want to bump that up or not. I'm finding myself hampered considerably by not having paper towels, so I'll clean those brushes later. I've now picked up some clean brushes, titanium white and phthalo blue. So a pretty intense high chroma blue. Whoops. And I am not going to answer that call. Sorry. Normally, when I do a broadcast, I have Do Not Disturb, but I somehow today forgot to turn it on. So sorry about that. All right. So I did just clean up just a little bit. Not all of it, because I like the dirty blue showing through quite a bit. Now I just picked up mixed into this a dioxazine violet. So I have bluish purple, almost a periwinkle blue or lavender on my brushes. And again, I'm looking for areas that already have hints of lavender or periwinkle blue on them. You can see, I hope you can see many times the benefit of painting with two hands. I'm going to scratch that mark. Everything I'm doing here is a guess, like I talked about a while ago. Everything I'm thinking, I think it would look good if I did, this or that. Everything I'm doing is a guess. After I do it, I either have a confirmation like, ooh, yeah, that was a good idea, or it wasn't such a good idea, or hopefully not, ooh, that was a disaster. Hopefully not too many of those. But it does happen. We all know. And I hope, just for me, by describing the painting process in this manner, I hope that I'm freeing up some of you early journey painters, because that's the way you feel, and you live perhaps under the illusion that good painters don't live that way. That, you feel like you're guessing all the time, and sometimes your guesses prove good and sometimes not so good. And you feel like, oh, when I get to be a good artist, I won't have to do that. And I want you to know that's completely wrong. Okay, we never, we can get better at guessing, for sure. But it's always still a guess. Anybody who's painting in such a controlled manner that they know exactly what's going to happen, what effect every mark is going to have, I call that a bad painter, frankly. There's no creativity. They're stuck in a rut. They are not in the adventure zone. They're in the dead zone. I sometimes call it the hole of the donut. There's no meat, sugar, dough in the hole of the donut. There's nothing there. And if there are some people who paint it, and it's typically hyper-realists, who paint in such a predictable manner that they know what's going to happen. That in fact is almost a definition of realistic or hyper-realistic painting. Ooh, I'm really liking See, you just heard me respond honestly. I add a little purple blue here, opaque, pale, mid-tone, about a 5, here and here, and all of a sudden there's just this atmospheric purple glow kind of thing that's happening that was not happening just a minute ago. And I'm really liking it. So there, see, that's in my book, that's good painting. I'm not saying that because I did it. Many of you do it as well. In other words, you experiment. You're always experimenting, always a little bit. What would happen if? What would happen if? And of course, you have to be willing to lay an egg, as they say. You have to be willing to, if you jump off the cliff, you have to acknowledge you're taking a risk. You could splat on the rocks of reality, the rocks of reality far below. But then again, I don't think anybody creates a truly transcendent painting. Now, William Bouguereau might putting me to the lie here, but I'll just finish it anyway. I'm not sure you can do a truly transcendent painting without jumping off the cliff. It's not the predictable stuff. And I would say that even Bouguereau, and I understand Bouguereau pretty well, because some of you know I did an exquisite copy of one of his paintings 20 years ago. And as I usually quip, I improved on it slightly, which is horribly arrogant to say, but also true. So now, I'm not saying I'm a better painter than Bouguereau. I'm just saying I made some improvements on one of his paintings. The woman's face was a little bit wonky in his, and I fixed that for him. All right, I think before I begin to boast any more audaciously, we should end this broadcast. David wants me to do a limited palette. That's a good idea. I actually love limited palette paintings. I usually call them like moody. In a way, and David, I don't know if I'll take up your challenge or not, but I do like the idea. I've mentioned this before. I had a good art friend. He still is a friend, but we don't see each other very, very often. 25 years ago when I was an illustrator. And he was a graphic designer, so he was an artist as well, very creative fellow. And he teased me one time. He said, "Dan, your favorite colors are brown and gray." Now, it was only funny. The reason I'm laughing is because there was a serious streak of truth in his statement. So I come from that. I come sort of naturally from the world of muted color, and actually enjoy it. I have found that it's part of the reason I don't do that much. Well, I've learned how to trick people into thinking I'm good with color. Part of the reason I don't do a lot of the muted stuff is because it seems hard to sell. I love moody, in fact, I mean, even subject matter. I love painting cemeteries, but I find they're a hard sell. I've sold a couple, not many. Not many compared to how many I've painted, I think. All right, I'm doing a signature here. I'm trying to mix up just the right color of warm orange, red orange, kind of a tangerine color, if you want to use a decorator name for it. We've talked about signature quite a lot. It is one of my, I gotta admit, it's one of my pet peeves. When somebody's a good painter, but they can't sign they just missed the boat. Anyway, your signature must be legible. I'll tell you why people do the illegible signature, in my opinion. Well, first of all, because they missed this lesson I'm about to give you, but they do it because they think it's cool. They think like the mark of Zorro. I will be so famous that people will see my X and fall down in seizures of adulation. Oh, look, it is a painting by Hex. Okay, I think that's preposterous and arrogant. Don't think that you're going to be so uber. Somebody is going to be that famous, of course, but I don't think that somebody's going to be so famous that you're going to be so famous that people will recognize you by your illegible scrawl. I think that's just the height. That is real arrogance, in my opinion. Even Picasso's signature was readable. It wasn't very good, but it was readable, for goodness sake. And there ain't nobody more famouser than Picasso. So number one, slow down. Use a Winsor Newton Series 7 brush. Take your time. Figure out what if you don't have a signature, well, work on it. I did. I can't remember how long ago it was. Must have been quite a long time ago. Maybe I redesigned, maybe I rethought it when I started doing oil paintings, which was about 3 or 4 years ago. 2 or 3 years, 22, 3 years. Now, you newcomers, had been a full-time artist, a full-time professional artist for decades before I started doing oil painting. So I didn't just start painting 23 years ago. When did you start painting? I don't know. Well, painting, or you mean start drawing? Age 4. I clearly remember drawing things before I went to kindergarten. And by the time I went to kindergarten, I thought I was an artist. I thought of myself as I marched up to the school. I'm an artist. I'm going to school. That part I remember. I had a little bit of swagger. Don't worry, God has beat that swagger down. I don't know whether I should blame God for it or not, but life has beat a lot of swagger, the real swagger out of me. That's why I'm able to have fun sometimes making arrogant statements. That's just to drive David crazy, huh, David? Anyway, thank you, David. I love your challenge, and I might do it. Hello, Redina. Yeah, I agree. Yeah. Many artists online paint the same way every time. Well, honestly, that's the norm, isn't it? That's what you're actually taught to do. If you take a clinic, develop a style, stick with it. There is some truth to that, but there's also some non-truth. All right, I'm going to stop right there. Let me put you straight on so you can see the painting a little bit better. For what it's worth, this will be on my website or on my Fine Art America. I needed one more unsold abstract painting, like I need a hole in the head. But I'll live with this for a while, see if it grows on me, see if it shrinks on me. I'll come up with a title. As you can imagine, I have an opinion. I don't like the title Untitled 325. Maybe that's what some artists truly lack, linguistic skill to such a degree that they cannot come up with a name. But I think that's unfortunate. And I'm pretty good with words, so I come up with a title. The circle is such an obvious element. No, it's not going to be the circle of life. I'm going to try to do a title that's not corny. But perhaps the mechanical nature of that, the lines, the geometric shape does suggest something to me. Industrial revolution maybe, or just industry, which could mean industriousness, right? I usually try to give my paintings, and again, not because I'm trying to communicate or preach, you should be industrious. No, I try to make the titles, if I'm going to make a title to an abstract, I'll make it uplifting in some way. There's plenty of ugliness in the world, amen? I'm so crazy, I think that artists are not here to add to the ugliness. It does not take a genius to point out things that are ugly. It does take a genius to create something beautiful, in my humble opinion. All right, I rambled long enough. Let me give you guys a wild circus ride and say thanks for watching me. I don't know what I'll be doing the rest of the day. If I find myself doing something artistically exciting, I will certainly do another broadcast. Thanks for watching. Thank you, Redina. Good to have you on board again. I wish I could work in a trip to British Columbia. That would be so fun. What a great place to live. All right. Bye-bye, everybody.